Hi, I'm Rhea.
And I'm Kat, and we're on Snooze.
Let's get cozy.
Let's get fucking cozy. Today we have a special guest right in between the both of us.
My doggy Milo. He will be serving as an emotional support animal today because we will be trauma dumping about our childhoods.
And Lord knows we're gonna need it.
Absolutely.
So I think we should start by giving a brief description for you, who our parents are. Mm-hmm. That way we can add on to how we came to be these delightful podcasters.
What led us to become the awesome, sweet, amazing, gorgeous,
Talented
humble human beings we are today?
I think you should start. Go ahead, give us a rundown on your family.
Okay. So my parents immigrated to the U.S. from Greece to go to school here. They chose Iowa out of all places.
A choice.
Yeah, they started dating here in the States. My mom got a good job in San Diego. He goes to San Diego with her. They accidentally have me.
Slay. Wedlock. We love to see it.
Yes, out of wedlock. They committed the dreadful sin that Greek traditional folk despise. Yeah, so they had me accidentally. 2 years later, consciously, they decide to have my sister.
Because if it doesn't work the first time, we try again.
Absolutely. And I guess second time was the charm because they didn't have another child after.
The golden child, if you will.
Yeah. Literally. That's why I'm on a podcast and my sister's going to med school.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so after they had me, my mom calls up her parents in Greece, asks them to move to the US to help raise us because at the time they were both working full-time. At the very beginning of their careers, they were like super busy, yada, yada, yada. So,
as parents do.
Yeah, so my grandparents moved to the US too, and I basically grew up in a multi-generational household. Greek was my first language. So my grandparents fed us, clothed us, bathed us, all that fun stuff. Yeah, they were really like my parents growing up.
Which I think is so, if you get it, you get it. I think that is something that happens, especially here in...
Yeah, I think many kids of immigrant parents have similar kind of upbringings in that sense where you live in a multi-generational household. I think those kind of traditional lifestyles are kind of automatically instilled.
Yeah, I agree.
So my grandparents played a huge role in my upbringing. We just were super fucking close to each other. Luckily, my grandma is still with us. She just turned 91. Love her to fucking death. Yeah, so that's kind of my family dynamic, briefly. What's your complicated story?
Where do I begin with my family dynamic? So my mom and my dad had one crazy little night, and they decided to conceive... Well, they didn't decide. They conceived me on a Super Bowl Sunday.
No way.
I swear to goodness. In my grandparents' home. But my parents were never together, so as long as I've been on this earth, they've always been co-parents rather than had a relationship and then decided to separate. So, before I was even one, I think my dad had already met my stepmom, who would be like a second mother to me all the way up until very recently. I'm 24. But when I was 21, they filed for divorce. Cue dun dun dun. Okay? But on that, through my dad and my stepmom, I have two older siblings, so...
Younger.
Yeah, younger, my bad. So, obviously, I wasn't good enough, and neither was the middle one. So, the third was their final and also their golden child. My mom got married in 2010, so I also have my stepdad now, which, heart him, he's the best. And they had another daughter, but we are 12 years apart. So, as soon as I was out the door, they brought in another one. So, that makes me feel like I was loved. I was not that big of a screw up for my mom. So a very different dynamic in comparison to you.
Yeah.
My parents have always been co-parents, And I've always felt like I had three parents up until I was like in my middle school years, which was a much different time. But from the core part of my childhood, I've always had three separate parents.
Yeah.
Opposed to two.
Yeah. My parents are still together. So we kind of grew up differently.
Yeah.
I grew up with two parents and you grew up basically with four.
Yeah.
I literally have little to no understanding of what it's like to grow up with four parents. Because at least for me, growing up even with two parents was a lot.
Yeah.
So, tell me about what four parents is like.
Honestly, it's not that bad. Well, it's my mom, and I think because my mom and my dad didn't have like a relationship, a romantic relationship previous to little old me, it made it really easy for them to co-parent.
Okay.
And I think they also weren't single. My mom was a single mom for the majority of my life. Because she met my stepdad when I was 13, 10-ish. And so that was a lot later in my life. So that my stepdad kind of just like took on that role and integrated himself into a dynamic that was already working pretty well. But I mean, growing up, we've done everything together. We had my graduation party, which you went to, was at my dad's house, but my whole family, all four sets of families were there. And most of my birthdays, we do a dinner all together with like my siblings and stuff like that. So their co-parenting relationship has always been very smooth and very about me, which has always been something I'm super grateful for. I've never had to experience this dynamic where, two parents separate and then there's like the custody like battle or agreement, and then it's like always like fighting.
Dramatic.
Dramatic drawn out. No, like my dad has always gotten along really well with my mom, and he even gets along with my stepdad, and same with my mom. She gets along with my stepmom. So it was always pretty easy, and I know you've seen them all four interact, and it's like not weird or anything.
No, it's like one big family, essentially.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. There's just a lot of parents, and I'm like...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Everyone's cool.
Yeah.
But everyone's parents.
Yeah. No, it's especially weird when we would have... Like, in high school, we would have, like, the exhibitions and stuff. Oh, yeah. And all four of them would come, and it's like, oh, this is my mom. Oh, this is my stepmom. Oh, this is my dad. Oh, this is my other dad.
Yeah. So, lots of parents. Are there different dynamics between, each of them? Are you closer to one set of parents or one person, or how does that work for you?
That's a good question. I am definitely closest to my mom, and through that, my stepdad. My stepdad and he teaches me a lot of things that he is really into. So he's really into cooking, and now that I'm living on my own, I always run to him to figure out how to cook something that he's made me before. Like, we're always talking about things like that. So we're a lot closer now just because I'm kind of at that point in my life where we just have more to relate to. Yeah. But for my mom, my mom was a single mom for the majority of my life. So it was just us two. And so, of course, there's just more... There were more moments of just us, which just made it easier for us to be closer. I think, especially as an adult, my mom we've maintained that relationship really well, and it's only gotten better over the years. Yeah. My dad and my stepmom are divorced. So the dynamic has always been the same. I've always categorized them together, or the relationship that I've had with them has always been collectively them. Whereas with my mom and my stepdad, I have a relationship individually with each one of them. But with my dad and my stepmom, I've known them. They've been my parents for as long as I could remember. And so there was no, integrating process happening there. But anytime there was, disagreements between me and my dad, it would be all three of us. It's definitely, I think, more of a traditional... feeling of you have these two parents, and when you're not getting along with one of them, you're not getting along with both of them in that way. But since they've been divorced, My dad and I have gotten closer, but I would say our relationship is a lot more. My dad worked a lot when I was a kid, so we weren't super close. Like, we didn't have much to talk about, and even when I did see him, he was always really tired and irritable. But now that he's having his own life, and my sisters are older, I'm older, it feels more like a friendship, kind of. Like,
no, I get that.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say that I feel like him and I have this, like, really noticeable, sorry. I would say that him and I have just a different relationship than the one I've experienced since growing up. But my stepmom and we don't talk or really include each other in our lives since they've been divorced, which is such a dynamic shift because we went from, like, the two of them as a unit and always associating, like, parents with the two of them versus now they're both, like, individually a parent, but because my stepmom is my stepmom, there is just, like, a little bit of weirdness as far as, like, how do we maintain a relationship even though she's no longer married to my dad.
Also, going back pretty much to the first episode, talking about how we started off being friends, where I would see you pretty much on the weekends, where your dad would come get you from my house, or we would drop you off at your dad's house. I really feel like I had a better or more of a relationship, I guess, with your dad and your stepmom than with your mom and your stepdad.
Yeah.
So I kind of got to see that, play out, that whole relationship essentially play out either in front of me or from you, like, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I know during that divorce, it was during the pandemic, which,
made things so weird.
Yeah, because, we physically couldn't be together to, like, talk about it.
Yeah.
But it was a huge, like, thing at that point in time where a lot of things were going on for you in regards to them because, their relationship was falling apart, but you were also, like, really in the middle of it.
Yeah, I would say not only was their marriage, like, coming to an end, but it also opened up this conversation about, like, it almost felt like our family was coming to an end as well. I think I would say up until this point, it never felt like, oh, she's my stepmom. And so, like, it never felt like I had a choice. Like, in the same way that you don't choose your parents.
Right.
Like, there was nothing that was, like, telling me, oh, you can just, like, choose not to talk to this person. But after they got the divorce, it became much more with everything going on. I mean, it was a messy divorce, and there were a lot of, scandals happening that were really just about their marriage. But, of course, kids hear it, and my sisters are older at this age. I'm also 21, so I'm old at this point. I'm not 5. And so, of course, we can hear where they're hearing the holes in their marriage. And so as their kids were, like, really taking that in and hearing that.
You take everything personal, too, I assume. Like, to an extent. You hear your parents talking like that, and you're like...
Yeah, and it definitely felt like after they got divorced, I was my dad's daughter. From that point on, nobody had to say it so exclusively to me, but it really felt like, oh yeah, like, Kat is...
my daughter, and you're literally the stepmom.
Yeah, like, there's no relationship, or even my stepmom's family, I've obviously known them my whole life. A lot of my traditions come from them, and a lot of the ideas around family come from their traditions and stuff like that. So to have this be like, oh, okay, they're getting a divorce, and when they first sat down and talked to me about it, it was like, no, nothing's gonna change. Like, our family will still be our family, and this and that. But of course, as my parents are, like, arguing about the faults in their marriage, there becomes a bigger divide between the two of them, and it becomes less cordial, less civil. And with that, when they really broke apart is really when I kind of just got decided to be my dad's, whereas my sisters were, like, theirs. They were their children.
Yeah.
And I would say that I never felt that way until after they got divorced. And even when they first announced it, it wasn't until it got really messy where it was so apparent that, like, I am my dad's daughter.
Yeah.
And, like, that definitely changed.
That must be crazy to, like, have experience just because you grew up seeing her as, like, your second mom.
Yeah.
Like, your mom, one of them. And from going to, like, from that to, oh, we actually have nothing, like, keeping us together anymore.
Yeah, and you know, there's always these conversations about, like, oh, but they're your parent. Like, whenever your parent does something that, like, hurts your feelings or, like, puts you in a compromised position, it's always, oh, like, but you have to let it go because they're your parent, or you have to forgive them because they're your parent. Now, all of a sudden, that didn't apply to my stepmom, and it was like, do I accept that this is the way that this family is? Do I still allow myself to be a part of that, even though you can't use that phrase anymore?
Right, like,
you know,
not your family anymore.
Yeah, like, yeah, and that's not to be like, so, like, oh, well.
Yeah,
but like she wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, she, not only was there that dynamic shift where I was my dad's daughter instead of their daughter, but it also added on to the fact that, like, nobody could tell me, oh, but that's, like, your mom, so, like, you have to,
it's like, no, now this is a woman who used to raise me who wants, like, nothing to do with my dad.
Which is a much longer sentence. Like, they can't just throw that at you when you're, like, complaining about your step-parent. So that was just, like, a very different dynamic for the both of us. And so at a certain point, I had decided to take a really big step back from my stepmom's family. Obviously, my stepmom is still my sister's mom, and so
she's still in the life.
Yeah, she's still in the life, and so we still talk and we still see each other from time to time. But her family, I haven't talked to since they got divorced. You know, which is so odd.
Yeah. So how do you think that affected you mentally? Are you okay in the head?
Honestly, not fucking really.
Elaborate.
Yeah, I'm gonna be real. This is the worst thing to talk about for me. To have somebody who I see as a caregiver, and then to have the dynamic change so quickly is just mind-blowing to me. There is, like, this specific event where I got invited to my cousin's birthday party, and it's in the pandemic times. Like, it's not as strict, but, like, we're still doing the outdoors, 6 feet apart kind of thing. And he texts me and he's like, oh, we're like having a little birthday thing, like, why don't you come over and, you know, drink with us, whatever. And I'm like, you know, I haven't seen them. You know, we hang out all the time. So I was like, oh, I haven't seen them. Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna go. I could use a little party. And as soon as I'm pulling up, I get this text from him, and he's like, oh, you know, I didn't know your dad got invited, and he's bringing his new girlfriend. And he's like, oh, you know, if you don't want to come in, like, don't worry about it, whatever. But I'm like, no, like, I don't want to look like a little bitch. So I'm like, no, like, I mentally can handle this. Like, I'm good. And so I go in, and they come in shortly after, or I'm coming shortly after them, and I meet them. And it's so brief. And my sisters and I had known we wanted to do this step together. And so I didn't want to make it, like, a formal meeting. Like, it was just like, hey, nice to meet you, whatever. And then that was literally it. I got drunk, drank way more than I needed to, and just, like, that was the end of that. But shortly after that, my stepmom had texted me, and I think I can feel empathy in the sense that I would also feel some type of way if, you know, one of my kids was meeting my ex-partner's
new girlfriend,
new significant other. But this just like blew so far out of proportion. And there was like a text sent to me from my stepmom basically like saying, how could you betray me like this and that? You know, like you're so ungrateful for all the things that I've done for you, and on and on and on. And for me, I was just kind of, and
you're the kid.
Yeah, not only that, I had literally texted my mom like right after it, and I was just like, oh my god, I just met my dad's new girlfriend. Like, what? WTF?
Yeah.
And, you know, she's like, oh, weird. Like, is she nice? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't really say much. And she's like, oh, weird. You know, like me and my mom were just like having a casual conversation about it. And then when I get this text, I feel so much shame for even like still agreeing to come in. Mm-hmm. Even though like thinking about it more stable in the mind, I think like, well, I just wanted to be there for my cousin. Like, I just wanted to hang out with my cousins and like have a good time. And I didn't think it would cause such a rift.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for my stepmom and I to like recover from that, or for her to forgive me for that.
Which is crazy because you're just the kid. Why is it your responsibility to like be in the middle of that? That's between your dad and her.
Well, yeah, and I think that this is something that like people can relate to, as far as like sometimes, and I didn't recognize this pattern until I had gone to therapy for this, like after the fact. But this is how the dynamic has always been. Like, I do something that she feels betrays our trust in our relationship, and suddenly I'm ungrateful for everything that she's done for me, I'm sorry. And I don't take, you know, I don't love her and this and that, and I don't care for her the way that she cares for me, which is definitely a pattern of narcissism, and I had never noticed it until much later in my life.
Yeah.
But even that event, I had kind of I felt so guilty, and I felt like, oh my gosh, like how could I do this?
Right.
Like, I'm like, why did I even...
Stupid old me.
Yeah.
How did I not see that?
That this was going to hurt her feelings. Yeah. And which I knew. I think I knew in that moment, and that's why there was this whole thing about how could I not tell her when all this was happening? But I also knew like the emotions were so fresh that it happened in a split second. Like, I could not have like prevented it or planned it to go differently. Like, it happened and it was an accident, and it was like, it was what it was.
And it was a lot for you, too, meeting your dad's new girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like, that...
I got violently drunk.
Yeah, like, that... Like, you should be focused on how you're reacting to that and your feelings towards that, not how your stepmom might feel about you meeting this woman. It's like, no, you're meeting a new woman for the first time, too.
Yeah, and it's like this idea of always having to put her feelings first just like is a continuous pattern.
Yeah.
Even with like the holidays, when the holidays come around, and before, when they first got divorced, it was less of a choice. Like, it wasn't really given to me as a choice to celebrate the holidays with them, or with my stepmom, and but I would still come over, I would still try to see her, but I never really felt like I was supposed to be there. And so then when I finally stopped making the effort to like plan holidays all together, then it would be like, oh, like you never call and you never see me and this and that. And I think for me, it's just like at some point I had to say like, okay, like I can't participate in this because I'm wrong either way. Mm-hmm. And there is no recognition about the position that it puts me in, like, oh, I'm my dad's daughter until I'm not. Yeah. Like, I'm my dad's daughter, and every single time you're upset with me,
I become your daughter too.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Like, when it comes to the things that are like Christmas and like that are about really like family forward, I'm not your daughter. But then when I do something that's like
not your fault, or
like I choose not to include you, then all of a sudden I'm your daughter, and like, how could I do this to you? Which I think really and we're talking about like generational, like that's entirely, my stepmom's mom is also exactly like that. And even after the divorce, like all of a sudden, I was not only my dad's daughter, but every mistake that my dad made in their marriage somehow became a characteristic I had. So like, all these awful things about my dad were also awful things that were about me. And it was just like respectfully, like my dad had me on the weekends. So like the person,
how much of that could be
yeah,
me too.
like how much of, yeah, and I have two sisters.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how is it that like they only mess me up but not the other two?
Like you saw him twice a week at most.
Yeah, no, literally twice a week.
But you're the carbon copy of him, and your sisters aren't.
Yeah, no, yeah, and so even through that, I understand like there is no, they don't believe in therapy either. So like when I say like, oh, you're a lot, like you carry the same patterns, it's like, don't ever compare me to my mother. And I'm like, right, I'll shut the hell up.
Right.
But to me, this drawn out victim feeling is something that her mom also like plays far too well.
Well, yeah, a lot of the things that you learn, most of the things you learn are from your parents.
Yeah.
And if they have unhealed shit, then that's going to carry on to how they raise you.
100%.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you see that in your parents too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
Even like, I'm sure like communication is one thing, and like you obviously you're going to learn things from your parents. Like I think that when they got divorced though, I had really started to see those things in like full effect. Like I started to really notice such patterns. Like even, I'm only seeing them twice a week, right? Or 2 times out of the week. But I'm also I'm interacting with my stepmom all the time.
Yeah.
And so these patterns of like, like, how could you do this to me? Like, even things that are not necessarily like, they just happen.
Yeah.
Like outside factors, but they have to be someone's fault, right? I could see myself falling into that pattern.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, me and my dad, unfortunately, have the same fucking communication style.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very much on that spectrum where it's like, I would rather figure it out on my own, deal with it, move on from it, and then, like, come back
and talk about it.
Which
we've seen in our friendship, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think maybe that's why I think I understand that, too. Mm-hmm. Like, my dad he's an avoidant like that. Yeah. Like, especially when, like, even now, when me and my stepmom get into tisks, my dad very much takes, like, a backseat approach to all those problems. And in this way, I can see why, like, I understand that. Like, I understand why he does it. And in the same way that I understand why you do it. Yeah. I would definitely say that, like, the communication style passed down through us, majority came from my stepmom. Yeah. But I think that's just like spending more time, like the most time with her. But it also showed me like how to react to like my dad's style, for example. Yeah.
It didn't teach me how to react to my mom's style because so I'm doing a lot of that like learning on my own through therapy. Shout out Kristen.
I would say I think I'm like your mom in that way though.
Yeah.
Like I'm a talker. I need to like talk about it. Mm-hmm. If something's going on, like I need to have some type of like resolution to it. But I would also bring up too that like it's something about parents about like not knowing how to say sorry.
Oh yeah. Like oh yeah.
Especially my mom, bless her heart, she goes to therapy. She's been through the therapy ringer. So I definitely hear those things from my mom. Yeah. But on the contrast, the day that I get a sorry from my dad or my stepmom will be the day that I roll over. Like, I do not hear that from their mouths ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear it from my mom. She knows how to apologize.
In her own way.
Yeah, in her own way.
There is no I would say in this way, having two sets of parents, my mom and my stepdad's parenting approach is much different. Mm-hmm. And so I think for anybody else who would just have that one set, right? Like if for my sisters, for example, they only ever experience my dad and my stepmom. And so they have a different version of each parent in their own head. Mm-hmm. And even now we talk about that, like, yeah, we have the same parents, but they don't feel like the same parents.
Yeah. But you get two different versions of them.
Yeah, 100%. And so there is this huge dynamic change. Like, I think anybody else who would make the active choice to distance themselves from not only one of their parents, but like a whole side of a family would have a really difficult time. And not to say that time wasn't difficult, but I think my mom really validated that experience for me. And my mom has always been my little cheerleader. I heart my mom.
She has. She's great.
I know. She's a lot different though. Like my mom, we'll get into an argument, and my mom is also a little bit ruthless, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I'm kind of scared of her mom.
I think everybody's scared. Good way. Yeah, I think everybody's scared of my mom
because I'm like, I know she'll call me out. Everything she'll say is on point, but
it's like brutally true.
Yeah, but I'm like, can you say it like in a nice tone?
And she won't.
Please? No, she won't.
She won't.
She's like, is that really how you're leaving the house? And I'm like,
wait. Yeah. The other day she saw you. I don't know why you were over at the house, or we were picking something up, or I don't know what the fuck we were doing. But she was like, does Rhea always wear the same white tank top and jeans? And I was like, Mom, like, I don't know. Like, maybe that's just what she likes to wear. And she's like,
it was a hot day. Sorry.
Yeah, and she goes, well, she really needs to be doing more for her figure. And she like walks away. And like that's just like my mom. Like she's but like she hurts you. She said your nose job looked great. But you know what? If my mom didn't like you, she would also tell you.
Oh, absolutely.
I've had my mom not like some of my friends,
and she says it.
No, she says it. Yeah. She's like straight out with it.
Oh yeah.
So my mom is obviously very different. My mom is like, all of this to say that there has never been a time where, especially in my middle, like my high school to now, has there ever been a time where we've like argued and I've said to her like, I really hate the way that you just like say things. Like sometimes you're just too brutal for me. And she'll be like, she'll pause and like kind of give me this look like, are you dumb? But then she'll go, okay.
Let me sugarcoat it for you.
Yeah, she'll be like, okay, like, I didn't mean it that way. I'm just trying to say that I care about you and I question some of the financial decisions you're making or whatever we're arguing about. And she'll be like, but I love you nonetheless. Like, I'm sorry that I said it that way. And I'm like, thanks, Mom. Like, you're too kind. Whereas, like, I would never get that out of my dad and my stepmom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not individually or together.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that, you know, having four people with four different backgrounds and different family dynamics raise one person, like, that's, like, so many different, like, clashing views.
What can I say? I'm complex.
I was gonna
hard to figure out. And just a little crazy.
Yes, on that. But I think that's, like, I think that's such a good thing to also have had growing up, because it kind of gives you multiple points of views and multiple, like, ideas of how to communicate and how to instill different views or beliefs in people and, like, your friendships and children in the future, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it's very much like, no, I have two people and that's kind of, like, all I know. And it's either my mom's way or my dad's way.
Yeah, that is true. I will say, I kind of like mentioned it earlier, but like even in the last episode, I was kind of talking about like my communication style in this like past relationship and how like I was nowhere near perfect. But even in that, like I very much carried this idea of what love looked like in relation to my dad and my stepmom. And so when they got divorced, that really like blew my mind. Like the way that I approached relationships, I'm like, oh, like, I thought you were supposed to, like, tell somebody you fucking hate them when you're arguing and, like, call them all these bad names. Like, I thought that that's just, like, the quirky thing that you did. But then, like, you realize, like, oh, wait, like, yeah, that's actually why they're, like, getting divorced. Like,
right.
Yeah, they're actually, like, not meant to be and, like, whatever. But even moreover to that is, like, my mom met my stepdad much later in her life. And so there was a much different approach. I mean, my stepmom and my dad met when they were, like, 20 years old, 19 and 20. So they met super young.
Yeah.
And whereas my mom and my stepdad, they already had, like, established careers. My mom already had a child who was 10 years old and, like, you know, all of these things. And so there was a much different dynamic there. Also, I think my mom has had a very similar experience, I would say, to you. Like, obviously it's super different than how I grew up, but my mom could see all of the areas in which she felt like she disagreed with the way that her parents raised her. And so my mom, like, does all the steps. She went to therapy, and, you know, like, having me was a active choice. Keeping me was an active choice. Whereas, like, I think my stepmom and my dad, like, having kids was just the next step.
Yeah.
To growing their lives. It wasn't necessarily because, like, oh, I've been destined to be a mother.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, my mom is like, oh, I got pregnant on my own and I'm gonna be by myself.
Yeah.
Like, I have the choice whether or not to keep me or to get rid of me.
My mom, same thing.
Yeah. Just to, like, reiterate, like, my mom is just so, she is, I feel like, the best mom ever.
Yeah, I think your mom is fucking fantastic.
I agree. She teaches me so much about communication, and even with this whole, my mom relatively stayed out of a lot of things when it came to the divorce.
Yeah.
Like, my mom obviously had no relationship to my dad, so she was like, I don't actually care if they're divorced. But I think she could see the way it was affecting me, and when I would tell her, you know, like, these are the issues I'm having with my stepmom, she was really there to be like, well, you know, like, you get to make what your family is.
Yeah.
And do you think it is a display of love to be treated this way? And that was something that I just never fucking clicked in my mom is definitely the person who had always given me the tools to, I mean, my mom put me in therapy at a really young age and really helped navigate these family dynamics and feelings. And so for that, I think it just shows the type of mom she is. My mom is the best. I love her so much.
Yeah, your mom always made sure that you were, like, her top priority.
100%. And I think those are even now, like, now, obviously I'm older and I'm in this, like, very committed relationship. And so, like, conversation about having kids definitely comes up. Obviously we're gay, so, like, it's like a very conscious choice.
So it's a deeper conversation.
Yeah, but
it's not, let's have unprotected sex.
No, literally. It's more like when I do think about the type of parent that I would be and think about, okay, like, how do I break these, like, generational curses that, like, both I've lived through and my sisters are living through? Like, what are the things that I want to carry with me?
Yeah.
I always think to the type of mom that my mom is.
Yeah.
And I always, you know, like, they're always, like, right, there are the things that your parents pass down to you that are not necessarily the best, right?
Yeah.
But my mom teaches me so many great qualities, and I hope that I only pass down the things that my mom has taught me to my next kids.
That reminds me of, like, this like, quote I had seen where it's like, be the person you wish you had, or, like, be the person you wish be the person you wish you had. Which is very much just that. Like, yeah, your mom instilled lots of great qualities and everything.
Yeah.
But there's also, from the other dynamics around, it's like, weren't the greatest qualities to get.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So now you've, like, seen what kind of you want to kind of give forward from there.
Definitely. Even with my sisters, my sisters are still, like, they still have my dad and my stepmom. They're still younger. But even in them, there are a lot of things that I feel I'm actively trying to change within our dynamic, like the way that we communicate with each other, the way that we spend time together, the traditions that we have as a family unit really are extended to just the three of us.
Yeah.
Which I think is something like I like to practice. I really like to redo, especially now that we're all at that age where we're like able to do those things, you know?
So the reason that I haven't been talking about my family dynamic very much is because I didn't really have a really close relationship with my parents, but suddenly everything kind of like blew up, which we're going to talk about in the next episode, where we're kind of going to get into the nitty-gritty details of my relationship with my parents, because for those story times, for that episode, we definitely have very different experience.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about our coming out experiences, and to be very blunt, there isn't much story in mine. There is almost like I was out and then that was it. Like there is no arc. But like Rhea said, there is a lot. I mean, she's kind of mentioned here, like with the dynamics of living in a multi-generational household and things like that. But the huge energy shift in your guys' relationship did happen after you came out.
Yeah, it went from pretty like stagnant to no real like depth in relationships and stuff like that to suddenly like everything became about the relationship I had with my parents.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes with next week's topic.
Yeah, we don't want to give too much away. We just want to get all the trauma out in 2 episodes and just let it be.
Let it simmer out there.
I think it's interesting for both of us to see such a family dynamic shift and change, especially as like we're best friends. So obviously we've seen our parents, we've seen the relationship that each one of us has with our parents, and we've also seen the change in that.
Yeah.
From an outside perspective.
Absolutely. We talked about having seen each other's parents, like how they interact in real life, but then I also get to hear about what's going on behind closed doors. That, every fucking family puts up a front about like who they want to like show that they are.
Yeah.
But we've really seen like
we've seen
we've seen the good and the bad and everything in between.
Yeah, 100%. And next week we're gonna get into really your character arc, really where you start to, I think a whole lot changes for you in a really condensed amount of time.
Yeah. And
we're excited to get into it. Milo will be present for that episode as well, so
so get ready. that one's a fun episode now.
Yeah, it's fun now.
Yeah, fun now. Not when everything was going down.
It's always like that. That's when we met Kristen, so.
Love you. That's my therapist.
But till next time.
I'm Rhea.
And I'm Kat. Good night.
Good night.